I want to start by introducing our sponsors, Lavender & Company. Today, as they've done before, following this luncheon, they're offering a very unique opportunity. As data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence fill the headlines, we're hosting a panel discussion where we'll reveal how the businesses of East Texas can utilize these pioneering concepts and technologies. Our presenting sponsor works in the field of data analysis and forecasting and is leading that conversation. Founded in Tyler in 2015, Lavender & Company provides consulting services to businesses across East Texas. I think last year we actually listed most of the businesses, and talking to Michael, I just said, we're going to use the technical term and just say a lot. So many different types of businesses. Focusing on the interpretation and utilization of operational and financial data, Alden War and Michael Lavender work with business owners and executives in a diverse range of industries. Both Michael and Alden graduated from Texas A&M University. Thank you. Where their academic pursuits included finance, accounting, statistics, and data science. Given the broad scope of clients they serve and with the numerous personal experiences of buying, leading, and selling companies, these two business partners have a unique skill set. Using business data to analyze trends and build models that mathematically optimize opportunities. Please join me in welcoming Alden War and Michael Lavender.
We're excited to be here with everyone today, and I've commented to a few of our guests, when was the last time you sat in a room with 1,000 people who were extremely excited? And by the way, there's a wait list for today's event, folks that didn't even get to join us here. 1,000 people in the room excited to hear about economics, to hear about the economy, to hear about how that's going to impact our lives here in East Texas. I think it's a testament, especially to Dr. Perryman, but also to our community. This community has always had a forward-thinking mindset, and we're just honored to continue on in that journey, always looking to what's next. What's going to be the thing that defines global, national, regional, state, and eventually and ultimately our local economy. So honored to be here, honored to be a part of this event, and my partner, Alden War.
Thank you. I have the opportunity today to introduce our main speaker, Dr. Ray Perryman. This afternoon, we'll have the opportunity to hear his 2024 economic outlook. Dr. Perryman is president and CEO of the Perryman Group, one of the nation's leading economic and analysis firms. Dr. Perryman has been called a genius by the Wall Street Journal, a world-class scholar by Business Week, the unofficial state economist by the New York Times, and the most quoted man in Texas, according to Texas Monthly. Dr. Perryman has been honored by the Democracy Foundation for his role in promoting capitalism in China, as well as the Asia and World Institute for promoting international trade and academic exchange, and the Systems Research Foundation for his contributions to the field of economic modeling. He has also received the Lifetime Achievement Award for the International Institute for Advanced Studies. Dr. Perryman has played a key role in the creation of hundreds of thousands of jobs and is a past recipient of the Outstanding Texas Leader Award. He has been honored by the Texas legislature for his tireless efforts in helping to build a better Texas. He devotes a substantial portion of his time to pro bono efforts, seeking solutions to major social problems such as hunger, indigent health care, and child maltreatment. Dr. Perryman was inducted into the Texas Leadership Hall of Fame in 2014 and received the 2016 Cesar E. Chavez Legacy Award for his humanitarian efforts. Most recently, he was selected for the 2019 Go Global Award from the International Trade Council as the Outstanding Global Economic Analyst for his work on trade, energy, and the environment. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ray Perryman.
Well, thank you very much. Is this thing live and working okay and everything? Okay, great. Wow, this is awesome. I love this facility. I think it's a real statement to what this community does and how you see yourselves and how you invest in yourself, and it's indicative of many of the great things going on around here. We had the meeting over at Green Acres for years and years at that great facility, and every time I got up there, I had the urge to preach. And today I have the urge to sing, but I will resist it. I promise. But it's great to be here with everybody. I appreciate the kind words, and people say nice things like that about me. I always appreciate it. I also appreciate you said all those things people have called me. You didn't say what my wife calls me, and I appreciated that as well. But or my kids. Then you get dork, dweeb, nerd, loser, all sorts of things. But it is great to be here. And I hate to do it in a large crowd like this, and I know you're here and it said you were very enthusiastic and all that kind of thing, but unfortunately I've decided today to suspend my campaign for president. Okay, I'm dropping it right now. Okay, I tell you, man, it's something else up there right now. I was up there a few weeks ago. They're trying today not to shut the government down. That shouldn't be too hard, but it seems to be something they're working on to try to keep everything open. And when I was up there recently, they were trying to pass a resolution to honor Cinco de Mayo, okay? They couldn't agree on a date. I mean, that's pretty bad, it really is. It is great to be here. As many of you know, I grew up over in Lindale, and I know we got a lot of folks from Lindale here, a lot of folks here as well, and it's always great to be back home and to get to spend a few minutes with you. We'll try to say a few things that hopefully you'll find interesting and hopefully will be useful to you as you go forward and what we can do. I'm going to try to pick a few topics I think are particularly relevant to Tyler today. If we have some time, I'll take some questions and everything at the end. But let me start with just a couple of basic numbers here that I think will really kind of, in a nutshell, show you where we are. If you look at the month before the pandemic, and then you look at today, in between we went down, we went up. Don't worry about anything in between. The United States is up about 4.5 million jobs from where we were before the pandemic started. That's pretty dang good. Okay. Texas is up 1.1 million jobs, a little more. So some very quick math will tell you if the country's up about 4.5, Texas up a little more than 1.1, 1 out of every 4 jobs that's been created in this entire country since February of 2020 has been created in the state of Texas. And that is a pretty remarkable statement when you stop and think about it. Yeah. Man, wow, I appreciate that. I'm telling you, man, I may have to run yet. It's tempting. But, during that same time period, the growth rate in employment in Tyler is just a little more than twice the national average. So you have done very, very well in that way, and you continue to do quite well. And we think that's going to happen a lot in the future. When I was here last year, everybody that I knew, and their cat, and their dog, were predicting a recession. Okay. In fact, they had just done a poll of some of us. I didn't know what the results were, but I was one of the few that didn't think we'd have a recession. I found out later the vote from the 100 of us they polled was 97-3. And I was one of the 3. I thought we had the resilience to get through the year. It turned out we did. I'm very glad about that. I still feel the same way. I don't think we're going to have a recession this next year. Some people are still predicting it. Most of them have calmed down. In fact, my friends at Bloomberg, and they are good friends of mine. I've known them for years. But one time, at the end of last year, they predicted a 100% chance that we'd have a recession last year. I called them. I couldn't stand it. And I said, this is the economy. There's not a 100% chance of anything, But anyway, so we managed to get through that. There is one risk factor out there that gives me about a 20% chance. I don't think it's going to happen, but I'll tell you about it when I get to it. But in terms of economic outlook, I'm not going to read. We've got the report we always do. And by the way, that report has a big blazing thing on it that says 40th annual this year. That really hurt when my staff put that on there, I have to tell you. We started doing the models about 45 years ago. I know many of you weren't born then, and I frankly find that disgusting. Yeah. In fact, I'm not sure I was born then, but we started 45 years ago anyway, roughly. And back then you used punch cards and dot matrix printers. And it was a very different world than the world we live in right now and all the technology that we can enjoy. And in fact, at that point in time, I remember Business Week or somebody did a story about it. It was the biggest economic model in the world. And it was 1,000 equations. And the reason that was the biggest economic model in the world was the biggest computer in the world at that time could process 1,000 equations, okay? Today, it's something like 200 or 300 million. I don't know. I don't count them anymore. But it really speaks to all the changes we've seen during that time. And we did the first forecast about 42, 43 years ago. Then we took it on the road. The first year was just Dallas and Houston. And now, and then we started picking up. Tyler was one of the first communities to bring it. So we've been coming here well over 35 years. I'm not sure how many, but a long time. And it's really been a great thing. And it does amaze me that something I thought was going to be a summer project one summer when I was on sabbatical at Baylor turned into what I did the rest of my life. But, and all I have to say is if all of y'all are here and there's 1,000 of you, you're really, really looking forward to this, you're all excited about it, you need to check out your social life, okay? But anyway, in terms of the economic outlook right now, I don't think there'll be a recession. We think the U.S. economy is going to grow at roughly around 2.6% or so over the next 5 years. We think the Texas economy is going to grow at about 3.4% in terms of output. And that's a very good, strong rate, right in line with what we've done historically. But of course, the actual numbers get bigger every year when you add the same percentage to a bigger number every year. And then we think Tyler was going to grow at about 3.3, which is a little bit below the state. I'll talk about that in just a minute. In terms of employment, we think that the state's going to grow at about 2.1%. Tyler's going to grow about 2.2. So you're going to create more jobs than the rest of the state. And the reason for that little flip-flop on output is very interesting. It has nothing to do with any of that cool stuff you hear about in Austin. It has nothing to do with any of that cool stuff you hear about in Dallas. It has to do with out there where I live now in the Permian Basin. That is driving gross product in Texas to be higher than it would otherwise. They don't employ a lot of people, but they're drilling. There's more oil production than any point in history by a wide margin out there. And if you think about the way statistics work, once you get a well working and it's just doing this, up and down, up and down, up and down, and kicking out oil, well, economists, we don't call it oil, we call it gross product. And so it basically creates a lot of economic growth in that area, but not so many jobs. The Permian Basin doesn't yet have back all the jobs it lost during the pandemic, but yet its output is kind of driving the state numbers up a little bit. So that's why the state number is kind of a weird thing. It happened last year too, but it's kind of a weird thing. But nonetheless, this area is going to be one of the fastest growing areas in the state. You have a lot of very good things going on here, and I want to talk about some of those as we go forward here. I thought I'd try to do 2 or 3 things because there's never enough time to do everything that's going on in the economy and in the world. I thought first I'd give you a little update on inflation, interest rates, and all that kind of stuff, kind of what we see there, because we talk about that all the time, and it was in a very different place last year than it is this year. Then I thought I would talk about a couple of issues that I think are particularly interesting to you here in Tyler. One of them is the health and bioscience sector and what's going on there, because there's a lot of very exciting things, and they're playing into some things going on in the bigger world that I think are going to be very beneficial. And the other one I thought I would talk about that's always important around here is energy, because it's changing a lot. There's been, again, some new developments in the last 2 or 3 months, and that I think is worth talking about a little bit. And I want to try to give you a perspective on that as well as we move forward here. But let me start with the inflation, interest rates, that whole 9 yards thing. Obviously, it's a lot lower than it was last year. It's down to a little over 3%. It got as high as 8 or 9% about 18 months ago. So it's come down a lot, primarily because the Federal Reserve raised interest rates. I won't go through the whole routine I went through last year, but basically this was a garden variety inflation except a big one, and we treated it like that, and the way we always treat inflation has actually worked, and so it's coming down. I think the Fed has announced they're going to start lowering interest rates as soon as they can. I think that'll probably be in the next 3 or 4 months, something like that. But you may have seen the headlines last week, and I wanted to talk about this for just a second. The headlines last week, the Consumer Price Index went up a little bit more than they thought it would. And I mean, that kind of stuff, the stock market goes crazy for 15, 20 minutes, and then they figure out it's not that big a deal. But, people really drilling down on that right now. And it's an important number. It's a number people look at. It's how much we're paying for stuff. But the one that gets almost no attention, that we really should be paying attention to, is the Producer Price Index. And that's the one that measures how much producers are paying for things. Okay, how much we're paying for things, the people who make stuff are paying for things. That one actually went down 0.1% in December, and it's only up 1% all of last year. And the reason that's important is if they're paying less now, that means you're going to pay less later. Okay, and the Fed's looking at what's going to happen in the future. So that's by far a more important indicator. Nobody pays attention to it, but it's what we should really be looking at to figure out, if you want to know what's going to happen in 2, 3, 4 months down the road, that's the one to look at. And what that tells us is we're going to see inflation come down a little bit more. The Fed's going to get comfortable. We're going to see interest rates begin to come down some, and that's going to be beneficial for a lot of different things in the economy. Obviously, the housing market took a hit when interest rates went up. the mortgage rates go up, they're more expensive. Construction costs were going up at the same time. You kind of had a double whammy there, and that we're trying to work through. And so that's something that gets better. The commercial real estate market. All those deals are financed with money, primarily most of which is tied to prime in some form, prime plus or minus something. They're normally tied to something like that. So every time the Fed changes rates, the prime rate changes, and that starts a domino effect of a bunch of other rates changing. And those go up for consumers, they go up for others, but there's a lot of it in commercial real estate. Now, right after I left here last year, about on the 1st of March, about a month after I was here last year, a month and a half, the headlines in the world were Silicon Valley Bank failed. And that got a whole lot of attention, okay? And then literally 2 days later, or three, something like that, 2 or 3 days later, we had Signature Bank up in New York failed. And that was another great big bank. And then about a month after that, First Republic failed, which was another great big bank. And that got everybody worried, are we going to have another 2008 type banking crisis here? And the answer was, is, and will be no. All of those, and I'm about to talk about some issues in the banks right now, but that is not it. Those were not indicative of anything. They scared people for a while. But basically what happened was all three of those banks made the same mistake in a different way. And we have probably the healthiest banking system here in the state of Texas of any I'm aware of anywhere. Very, very, very good, well-capitalized banks, great regulatory folks that work down in Austin for us. And I mean, it's a really, really good system. But Silicon Valley Bank, the mistake they made was they wanted to be the cool kid for all the tech guys, okay? So what they did was they made loans to tech companies, which is okay, but they didn't risk adjust them properly. They even loaned money to tech startups. Well, those are a little bit risky. That's not the way banks normally operate. So they did all this stuff, then tech had this little dip that it had. So all those guys need more liquidity. They come to the bank, and the bank can't handle it because they had their money in treasury bills, price was down, so they went in. But basically their mistake was trying to be the cool kid for the tech industry. Okay. Then we go up to Signature Bank. Theirs was even more crazy. Their mistake was they wanted to be the cool kid for the cryptocurrency guys. Okay. They were literally lending money on cryptocurrency like it was a stable investment. I mean, banks aren't supposed to lend money to people that need it, you know. And I'm sorry, I couldn't help that. I couldn't help that. And I got a lot of great friends that are bankers right here in this room, and they support this area in great ways. But seriously, I mean, they were literally lending money based on crypto investments, and those can fluctuate wildly in either direction. And we had a big scandal in the industry, had a big hit. They come to the bank for liquidity. It's not there, so they had a problem. And then you have First Republic. They did another one. They also want to be the cool kid. They want to be the cool kid for all the billionaires. Remember back a year and a half ago when you could get a mortgage for 3% under certain conditions? They were making mortgage loans to the rich guys on $100 million houses with 5% down. Now, if you hold an open house for a $100 million house, you got to prove you can buy it to get in there, not a whole lot of people are going to show up. So when those folks started having problems, wanting a little liquidity, trying to downsize and realize they had some issues there and needed some liquidity, they go back to the bank. The bank, can't handle it. The values have dropped that much. The value of those types of houses dropped 20-25%. And so once again, if you had 5% down on that kind of house, you weren't going to make it, and they didn't have the liquidity. So every one of those banks failed for a completely different reason, all of which were trying to be something they shouldn't have tried to be. There was nothing systematic going on in the bank system. Now, in 2008, there was, and we had this big, huge adjustment with all the mortgages and that sort of thing. And that one was very different. And that one had to do with going a little crazy on some stuff. And I won't go into the details of how that happened, but it's a pretty interesting story. Well, I might. Do you want me to or not? It's up to you. Yes, okay. It's kind of funny. I mean, okay, I'll talk about it in just a minute. Basically. See, this is audience participation. You get to tell me what you want. I'll talk about anything. If you want to talk about barbecue, we'll talk about barbecue. Back in 2008, basically, Wall Street decided they loved mortgages. I mean, they loved mortgages. And so they kind of sent the word out in the financial system, we want people to have mortgages. And there were folks around saying, man, we can make that happen. Now, to make sure I don't single anybody out, I'm going to look over here and I'm going to point over here. So I have no idea. I'm not pointing to anybody in particular. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, okay? Even the Aggies. I don't want to hurt your feelings, you know. By the way, I'm going to take a time out here for a brief moment of personal privilege here, talking about the Aggies. One of my very dear, it's a good thing. It's a good thing, Michael. I'm not going to say anything bad. One of my best friends, who's a little, I would say much older than me. He's actually a little older than me. But one of my very dear friends who grew up in Lindale, Texas, is the chairman of the Board of Regents of Texas A&M University. His name is Bill Mahomes. His great nephew is named Patrick Mahomes. The name changed as they got fancier, but Mahomes was the first black to graduate from Texas A&M, and he was in the Corps. And he went from, you can imagine what it was like to be a black in the Corps in Texas A&M in the 1960s to being the head honcho of the whole place. And he's from Lindale, Texas, and I just think that's awesome, okay? So, now, I won't say anything else about Texas A&M, but I think that's awesome. Okay, I'm going to look over here and point over here, okay? There's a fat fellow right over there, okay? He doesn't have a job. He doesn't have any savings. He really doesn't know what he wants to do with himself. He's kind of shiftless. His mama doesn't like him. He kicks his dog. What he needs is a house. I'll straighten him right up. So we're going to get him a house because we're going to get him one of these mortgages where we don't ask for details like name, address, that sort of. We don't need that. Financial statements, we don't need any of that stuff. We'll make him a loan for a house. And then the Wall Street guys say, oh, that's fine because we'll take 1,000 of these kind of mortgages and we'll put them together and we'll make a bond. And the folks up at AIG would say, that's a AAA bond. 1,000 bad mortgages makes a perfect bond. Diversification, you understand, yeah. And then, so we did that, and we found every deadbeat in the country and we got them a house, okay. And Wall Street said, well, that's not good enough. We want more. Well, then these guys are smart, so they figured it out. They say, okay, we'll start writing derivatives on those bonds, okay? Now, a derivative sounds like a complicated thing. They make it sound complicated on television or in a classroom. A derivative is a side bet. That's all it is. In Tyler, Texas, I wouldn't dream of asking for a show of hands, but if you've ever gone to the track and you bet on a horse, you bought a derivative. That's all it is. You didn't own that horse, but you got paid based on how that horse performed. These folks didn't own those mortgages, but they got paid based on how they performed. They would write 100 derivatives on one bond. Now, what that meant was if you had a house here in Tyler that was $50,000 underwater, that created $5 million in economic losses. Okay? Just add 2 zeros. That's all you have to do. No matter what part of the central part of Texas, close to the Brazos River, not Waco, you're from. No, just add 2 zeros. But the point being, that's what took us down. It wasn't even the mortgages, it was the derivatives of the mortgages that took us down because the losses were just staggering. Right now, we have a few issues with credit card debt. We have some real estate debt. Nobody's writing derivatives on any of that stuff. So none of it, it's all big enough to give us a little hiccup. None of it's big enough to take us down like that. So that's the point I wanted to make. But we do have a little bit of a problem in the banking system, and I want to talk about it now, primarily in the larger banks outside of Texas. But we do have this situation in that, best we can tell, there's about $2.7 trillion. The technical name for that in economics is a bunch. Okay, there's about $2.7 trillion of real estate debt that's going to have to be restructured in the next 6 or 8 months. About $1 trillion of that, almost $1 trillion, is in commercial banks. And it doesn't quite work the way it is right now. Prices are down some, occupancies are down, interest rates are up. So, it doesn't quite work. And they're going to have to go through the process of restructuring that in the next 6 or 8 months. And that could cause some hiccups in the system. Now, I think we'll get through it without a recession for a couple of reasons. One is, the real estate market's looking better. Interest rates in that sector are already down a little bit. Prices are coming up some, so it's going to look a little better. Some acquisitions have already solved a few problems, and there'll probably be some more of that. So there's some structural things going on that make it look better. The other thing is, that's going to hit right smack dab in the middle of an election year. And the bank regulators really, they're not trying to make one side win or the other side win. They just don't want to get blamed either way. And the last thing they want to do is have a banking crisis in the middle of an election. They did that in 2008, and they didn't like what they got, and they did that in 1988, they didn't like what they got. They didn't care about the outcome of the election, they just didn't want to get blamed for the outcome of the election. And so that they're going to be a little more accommodating than you might find them being otherwise. Margaret Thatcher used to have a saying about the British when she was prime minister. She said, the British have a remarkable capacity to muddle through. And I think that's what we're about to do with this mortgage crisis, muddle through it, not create a recession, but there'll be a few little hiccups along the way. So that's the one risk I see out there right now, apart from other global stuff. I mean, there's always global things, and that you don't expect terrorist things, that sort of thing that could happen. But in terms of anything that's tangible and moving in a certain direction, that's the one thing that I see where lines could cross in a bad way, but I don't think they will. As I mentioned, the other two things I want to talk about today are the bioscience sector and life sciences and what that means to your area here locally, and then the energy sector as well. A year or so ago, by the way, has anybody here ever been to DARPA, the Defense Research Facility? If you ever get a chance to go, you need to go. I've been there a few times. It is the coolest place on earth. Man, they got robots doing all kinds of weird stuff. It's a great place. Well, the government created one of those in the past year for healthcare. It's called ARPA-H, Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, okay? ARPA-H is how they say it. They were going to have 3 hubs for that, okay? We knew one was going to D.C. There was a big competition for the other 2. And they asked me to be on the task force to try to get it for Texas, and they asked me to put together all the numbers and try to sell it and make the presentations and all that kind of stuff. And we put it together. And I honestly thought we were doing that so we could tell everybody what a good effort we put forth even though we lost. That's what I thought we were doing. Because I couldn't imagine, this is a plum. Whoever gets this is like when MCC came to, or Cemitech came to Austin. Whoever gets this is going to be, those states are going to be major biotech hubs in the future. Because this is where they'll put the basic research for Alzheimer's and cancer and all sorts of things. It'll all come right here and it'll spread out from here, and a lot of it will stick around. And we modeled all that and looked at it and saw that. And and the reason I didn't think we had a chance was because this is a very big plum. You know, you guys know I don't get involved in politics except to make both sides mad, but we are a very red state on the whole. Blue folks are making the decision on where this would go. So you kind of figure, why would they give a red state this opportunity? And they had an excuse not to give it to us because we don't have as much biotech as a lot of other places. We don't have as much as California. We don't have as much as North Carolina. We don't have as much as Massachusetts and so forth. So they had an excuse not to give it to us. So I thought we were just doing this to kind of put on a good show, get everybody to work together, and pull in the same direction. Lo and behold, in September, they announced it and we won it. They went to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Dallas, Texas. And the Dallas proposal was a combination of Dallas, Houston, Austin, and San Antonio all working together. That was easy. But we pulled in the resources of the military hospitals in San Antonio, the medical center in Houston, and the CPRIT organization, the Army Futures Command in Austin, and everything we could put together. We managed to coalesce it all. And what we were able to show was, even though we don't lead the world in this, in the last 10 years, we've had the most investment in it. We've been able to attract capital to it better than anybody else, like 3 times what those other states were doing. And that's the case we made, and that we were able to carry it forward. Well, what that means is bioscience is going to be a much bigger deal in Texas than it would have been otherwise. And life sciences, it was already the fastest growing industry in the country for a couple of reasons. Number one, demographics. We as a society are getting older, and we as a society are getting fatter. And when you combine age and obesity, you end up with more healthcare needs. And so it's been growing naturally just because of those factors to make it grow. COVID kind of put that on steroids because people began to focus a lot on putting money into medical research and that sort of thing. And so all of those things coalesced in such a way to make it a very rapidly growing industry, and something that was likely to kind of define a lot of U.S. economic growth in the future, and that is happening. And now with this project, that means a bunch of that's going to happen in Texas. And why I wanted to talk about that today is with everything you've done for the last 20, 25 years to build this area into a bioscience and life sciences complex, with everything you have going on right now with the medical school, the nursing school, the health science center, UT Tyler, all the programs that have been put together here with the companies you have that do bioscience and that sort of thing, you have positioned yourself perfectly to be a major part of something that's very, very significant going forward that I think is going to drive a lot of economic growth in a lot of places, and I think you're ideally suited to capitalize on that more than just about any area this size anywhere in the country. And so I wanted to point that out as something I think that's very, very positive that you've been making happen for 25 or 30 years that's going to really pay some bigger dividends now that this situation has happened and we've managed to bring this research hub here into the state of Texas. The other one I wanted to talk about a few minutes was energy. It is important here. It's always been important here, not quite as much as it was at one point in time, but it's a big part of your economy, and there's a lot happening. I was asked not too long ago, they had a dinner in Washington, and they invited all the congressmen who have anything to do with energy. Anything in their districts of any type of energy, they had them up there, and up in the Lincoln Room, they asked me to come and talk to all of them. And as you can imagine, like always, I made some folks mad. I do that. In fact, there was a column in USA Today not long ago that called me an equal opportunity offender because I don't produce numbers that are liberal or conservative or Republican or Democrat. I just make numbers, and both sides get mad at me and happy with me from time to time, sometimes on the same day, actually. But anyway, so I went up to talk to them about this, and a couple of other things have happened since then I want to mention that kind of moving us in a particular direction I think that's a little bit different in energy. What you hear a lot about climate change. And believe me, you should hear a lot about climate change. It is very real, it is very important, it is something we have to deal with. There's no question about that. It's a major issue and we have to deal with it. You also hear a lot about, well, the way to deal with it is to get rid of fossil fuels. That's not going to work. Okay, and it's just not going to work, and the numbers bear that out, that it's not going to work. And I was fortunately able to kind of explain that to some folks up there, and hopefully we're moving some things in the right direction now. But because they've been making it very difficult for the industry of late. And let me just try to explain this with some very recent data, not mine. Okay, I'm giving the other side, I'm giving other folks a home court advantage. I'll tell you what my numbers are, but I'm going to use the Department of Energy's numbers and the United Nations numbers. Okay, I'm not going to use any of my numbers for this. Okay. In October, the Department of Energy issued an International Energy Outlook, okay? And they said, what's the world going to look like? How much energy are we going to need in 2050? And they did a bunch of different scenarios. And the baseline, which is the one that, kind of what the most likely one, kind of what they think will happen, the baseline one, they said, we're going to need 34% more energy in the world in 2050 than we need today. And to get there, despite rapid growth in renewables, rapid growth in hydrogen, rapid growth in nitrogen, everything else you can think of, despite all of that, battery technology, the whole 9 yards, in our baseline scenario, we're going to need 21% more oil and 27% more natural gas in 2050 than we need today. We're going to have it to produce what the world needs. Okay, that was the baseline. Okay. Now, they did another scenario where they said, what if the world only grows about 1% a year? Which is lower than we've ever done. They did another one that said, what if we grow 4% a year? Which is about the highest we've ever done. They did another one that said, what if oil is $45 a barrel? They did another one that said, what if oil is $187 a barrel? They did another one that says, what if the cost of zero carbon technology stays right where it is right now? They did another one that says, what if we're able to drop it 40%? Okay, so they looked at all these different combinations of things. The one thing that they all had in common is we're going to need more oil and more natural gas in 2050 than we need today. The amounts varied, but in every case, we have to have more oil and more natural gas. Whether the price of oil is $45 or $180, whether we're able to have big advances in the cost of zero carbon technology or not, no matter what happened with the adoption of electric vehicles, all kinds of things, it didn't matter. On every single one of them, we had to have more energy than we've had before, okay? And more energy from those types of fuels. So what that says is Texas and East Texas has embraced renewable energy, and we should. Texas has the largest production of wind power in the world. We have the second largest production of solar power in the country. We're going to get to number 1 fairly soon. We have a couple of hydrogen hubs. We're doing nitrogen. We've got a plant going in Port Arthur doing blue ammonia. I mean, we have adopted all of that. We have more carbon capture investments taking place in Texas than anywhere else. And East Texas has embraced a lot of this, as we should, because it's all very, very important. But at the same time we do that, we're also going to have to reduce fossil fuels. Now, a couple of other, at least one other data point, and then I'll get to another one. We recently had a conference about a month ago called COP28. Did y'all hear about that? It got a lot of publicity. United Nations Climate Conference. They got everybody together, and the headline from the report was, they said, the headline was, we'd like to get rid of fossil fuels. If you read the agreement, it doesn't say that. It says we have a number of different avenues of ways we can meet the needs of the world, and some of them involve that and some of them don't. And most of the countries involved in this thing said, yeah, we're going to do it a different way. We're going to have to use fossil fuels. Okay. So, all of what that tells us is we're going to have to use fossil fuels, but we're going to have to use them better than we've used them before. We're going to have to be energy conscious. We're going to have to capture more carbon at the wellhead, capture it at the power plant, capture it at the refinery, capture it at the LNG plant, petrochemical plant, whatever, sequester it, get rid of it. We're going to have to do all of those things. We're going to have to do energy better, and there's a lot of new technology being developed to do that right now, but we're also going to have to reduce the energy. And why that matters for Texas is a very weird thing. Happened 230 million years ago, so we can't take any credit for it. Nobody paid any attention to it. There wasn't a single post on social media for 230 million years. I mean, it was nobody paid any attention to it. But what happened was some plates shifted around under the earth, just right, and created a situation where the oil that comes there, the lowest carbon oil in the world is offshore. And there's two spots where it's the very lowest. One is the Gulf of Mexico, and then another one is just a small piece of the North Sea, but basically all of the Gulf of Mexico. Okay. Then on the onshore, which is where we have to get 75–80% of our oil has to come onshore, the lowest onshore carbon of any place in the world was Texas, by a huge margin. The oil that comes out of the state of Texas, and primarily the Permian Basin, but also all the other formations as well, they're not as big, but they have the same basic plate shifting that took place, is 70% less carbon coming out of the ground than the oil we get from Canada. It's 70% less carbon coming out of the ground than the oil we get from Mexico. It's 70% less carbon than the oil that we get 57% less carbon than the oil we get from most places in the Middle East. And so what that says is the way markets work is as the premium on clean energy increases, the production will shift to the lower carbon oil because you get a head start on sequestering the carbon. So it's going to increase the demand for Texas oil going forward. And so I wanted to bring that up because I know, again, in this area, particularly with the Haynesville over here and a lot of other things, you have a big interest in that. It's a big historical piece. It's much more than average importance even still in East Texas. And so I wanted to kind of bring that to you. And then one other piece of it I want to mention, and then I'll stop and take questions, and we can talk about anything you guys want to talk about, because I want to talk about these things. I know I don't have a whole lot of time, so I didn't talk about the workforce. I didn't talk about some other stuff, and I'm happy to talk about any of that when you ask me questions. But the other thing I want to talk about goes back to another thing from the United Nations. It happened in 2015. They issued a report where they were going to see what they could do to make the world a better place. And the entire General Assembly, all 190 countries, signed off on this thing. And it said, we're going to try to reduce emissions significantly, like about 50%, and we're going to try to eliminate abject poverty throughout the world. That was their goal by 2030, okay? A couple of weeks ago, we did a report card on it. They're well over halfway to 2030 from 2015, and they hadn't made hardly any progress. And part of the reason they haven't made any progress is they haven't treated energy policy in the way they have to get it done. That recognizing we have to have an all-of-the-above strategy that uses all that. Right now, there are 3 billion people in the world who live on $3 a day or less. There are 700 million people in the world who live on $1.80 or less. That's the lowest we calculate. That's twice the population of the United States. There will be 1.7 billion more people in the world by 2050, and 94% of them are going to live in those countries. So we have a huge problem on our hands that we can only solve by responsible development of fossil fuels. We are going to see that, therefore, because markets make things happen. There's basically two laws of economics. I know if you took a course, they told you about the law of supply, the law of demand, all that kind of stuff. Those are just strong suggestions. I mean, we don't really have laws about this stuff. As far as I can tell, there's a couple of laws. One of them affected me directly, and I'm not sure who else, but one of the laws of economics is, I work in Waco and I live in Odessa. And the reason for that is almost 32 years ago, I married the mayor of Odessa. So the first law of economics is if you marry the mayor, you move, okay? That's the first law, okay? But the more important one is when something has to happen, it will. And we have no choice but to do this, okay? We literally have no choice but to do this, okay? So that's just to put you on notice that you are going to see, I think in the very near future, some very responsible development that's going to pay some dividends for all the areas in East Texas that have natural gas deposits and energy deposits and that sort of thing. I wanted to focus on that. We are in a great state. The single biggest, most important thing for economic development these days is workers. We have a young population we need to educate, but we have a young population nobody else does. The census numbers that came out this last week showed that 30% of the population increase in the country was in the state of Texas. That came out to 1,300 people a day. I'm not sure who else was in Lindale when I was. I know Kevin Fowler's out here. He's younger than me, but he was there at the same time I was. I'm not sure if anybody else was in Lindale at the same time. But when we lived there, the population of Lindale was about 1,200. We're getting a new Lindale every day in Texas right now. That's hard for me to wrap my arms around. How we educate these folks, how we train them will be very, very important for our future, but the mere fact that they're here gives us a huge economic advantage. I think we have a lot of very good things going for us. I think we have a lot of industries that are going to create a lot of excitement. I think because you're in an area that has population growth, which is very important. A lot of areas don't, even in Texas. You have population growth a little faster than the state. You have workforce growth. You have job creation. You have the investments you've made in a great community. You have the emerging industry that's going to be very strong in terms of health and biosciences. You have the traditional industry that's going to get stronger and stronger. So all of those things bode very, very well for the future of this area. So I feel very good about it. As always, it's an honor and pleasure to be here, and I thank you very much. Oh, okay. Boy, you guys make me feel good. Okay, any questions? Just anything, anywhere, and I may have to, if I can't hear you, you may have to come a little closer, but I'll do my best. Oh, somewhere over here. Somebody said over there, so I can't see, but yeah, I see you. Okay, I see you. Sure. Sure, be happy to. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Why is this seen as a dead technology? Okay, he said, why did you not talk about nuclear? And the truth is, as I was ticking him off, I forgot to, but I'll do. But I'll do a little better than that. Okay, yeah, we've been involved. He mentioned. I know you probably couldn't hear him. He mentioned that nuclear's been around since the 40s or so. We started working on nuclear projects back in the 70s ourselves, so we have a long history of that. It is a technology that makes a great deal of sense. It's a technology that has had some success over the years. It's a very clean burning technology. The spent fuel of a nuclear rod is the ultimate definition of an emissions-free type of situation. What has always happened with nuclear, and this is unfortunate, and hopefully it doesn't happen. And I should mention too, there's also some great new technologies coming out in nuclear right now. We're working with a company right now that they built a prototype in Europe, and this thing is so cool you can't believe it. They can build a mini nuclear plant on about 3.5 or 4 acres. Little bitty nuclear plant. They can use it to power an entire oil field, okay? They can take the water that comes out of that oil field from all the water use of fracking, run it back through the heat of that nuclear plant, and you could drink it if you wanted to. I mean, they're just going to recycle it back into the sector, but you can literally reduce water consumption, which is a critical issue. You can reduce water consumption dramatically. So there's a lot of good stuff going on in terms of nuclear technology and that sort of thing. But what has happened to us every time is when it builds momentum, then we have an accident. whether it's 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl or Fukushima. And once you have an accident, the investment community just runs the other way, and the capital dries up, and you can't get the capital for often a decade after that. And that's what we've had a lot of fits and starts with nuclear. The technology is very safe now. None of those plants, even back then, particularly the most recent one in Fukushima, didn't fail because of any of those types of issues. They fell for other issues. You can do it very safely. You can do it very effectively. Hopefully, we will see more investment in that, and that will be part of this whole all of the above mix that I mentioned earlier. But yeah, nuclear could have a very, very important place in the future, and we are predicting it to grow some in some of the scenarios. What else? Yes, sir. Okay, very good question. Long one. It's getting warm up here. I may have to take my jacket off. But the question was in the technology, and if I misstated, it's because I may not have heard everything, but the impact that we're going to see in terms of technology, how it's going to, in rural broadband, how that comes along, what's happening with the real estate, with people working from home, all of those kind of things kind of coming together. Where does all that lead us? First of all, rural broadband is extremely important. Okay, it is extremely important. We need to have universal broadband access here in Texas. Right after COVID, they formed this task force, a couple of them for the state to figure out what to do, and I was on one of them. And they gave me the task of writing the section on economic development. If you go look it up, you'll see practically the whole thing is about investment in rural broadband. Unfortunately, that language made it into the bill that we just approved bonds for to put some money into that. But that's very important because that's becoming infrastructure. That's becoming infrastructure. It's no different than in the 1930s with the REA, the development of the REA and rural electrification. It was necessary to bring electricity to rural areas for survival. The same thing with telephone service a few years later. I mean, these things become a part of what we have to have. And for rural America not to be connected, we have to do that. There's a lot of different technologies out there to do it. So you can do some of it with satellites. You can do some of it a lot of other ways. The difficulty, of course, is like the same thing we have with electricity and telephones, the population density doesn't justify big private investments in physical technology. And so we're having to figure out ways to overcome that. But no, it's very important. And I do think we're making a lot of progress. We've done better than a lot of states. And I think you'll see that move forward. As far as the real estate market, after COVID, obviously we all started meeting a lot more remotely and doing a lot more remotely. Where we are now is we're doing a lot less than we did in 2020 and 2021, but we're still doing a lot. I mean, like very good example, today I had a meeting this morning. I'm going to have another one this afternoon in other states, and I couldn't have done that before this technology on the days I'm doing other things. So it's very nice. It's multiplied us a lot. It has changed the office dynamic a lot in that not as many people are in an office building in a typical day. And that has a lot of implications for real estate. It's kind of a weird thing the way it works. Most companies now have evolved. In fact, the numbers came out this past week. Only 1% of the people, there's only 1% more people working from home all the time now than there were before the pandemic ever started. But there's a whole lot of 3 days in, 2 days out, or the other way around. There's a whole lot of that, a whole lot of hybrid work, relocating offices closer to neighborhoods, that sort of thing, put some pressure on downtown spaces. All of those things are going on right now, and it's going to fundamentally change office space. A couple of things are happening. One is that although you're seeing fewer people in the office on a given day, you're seeing more square footage per person. Because people are now saying, for a while we went through, when I first started building these models back, over 40 years ago, a long time ago. Had to remind myself again. But I think I look pretty good for 98, don't y'all? I mean, I don't know. But anyway, when you built an office absorption model, you included about 350 to 400 square feet of office space every time you added a new worker. And it varied by industry, but that was a rule of thumb, somewhere in that range. That got down to about 150 because of open workspaces, cubicles, job sharing, office sharing, all that kind of stuff. It's not going to go back to 350, but it's edging from about 150 up to about 200 now. Because people are saying, if you want me to come to the office, I want a door. You know, if you want me to come to the office, I want more space between my desk and the other desk. And people are accommodating that. So you're seeing some of that. The other thing you're seeing is a lot of repurposing of office buildings. And that's just beginning to happen now with like urban residential, retail, those kinds of things, mixed use, hotels, those kind of things. It's not a simple thing to do, but people are doing it. And I think you'll see that going forward. Markets figure these things out. You know, if you just run the numbers, it says, oh, we're going to have an extra office space for 25 or 30 years. It never works out that way. Back during the real estate bust in Texas years ago, in 1990, the Austin American-Statesman had a headline that said, Austin has a 25-year supply of commercial real estate. We're so overbuilt, we don't have to build anything for 25 years. That would have meant nothing got built in Austin before 2015. I don't know if you've been to Austin, but that's not what happened, okay? But 3 years later, just 3 years, 1993, just 3 years after they wrote it off for years, the National Association of Industry and Office Parks did a big survey of real estate markets. And guess what the hottest real estate market in the country was in that survey? It was Austin, Texas. And all that to say, we figure this stuff out. We're not just going to let the buildings sit idle, you know, and empty. We will do things and repurpose those buildings and those sort of things. But that does have a lot of implications for real estate, for what you could justify in terms of cost and expenses and those kind of things and structural issues. There's a lot going on there, but we're in the process of sort of sorting all that out right now. That was a long answer to a short question. I apologize. I'm guilty of that quite often. Yes, sir. Do I have opinions on how AI might affect things? Yeah, I do. And I understand you guys are having a seminar to talk about some of this afterwards. But yeah, my basic view on AI is that it's going to change a lot of things. There's no question. It's going to change how we do a lot of things. You're seeing a lot of things written now about how it's going to displace and get rid of all these workers and all that kind of stuff and redefine everything. It will definitely change our workforce. It will change the way we do things. In the short term, it may displace some jobs. In the long term, it will create jobs. And the reason I say that is there are literally millennia of history to support that. Those of you who are even younger than me, remember back when we were all talking about, is the internet going to get rid of all the jobs? People were talking about that. We don't need any more middlemen anymore with the internet. We don't need any of this, we need that. A few years before that, computers. Man, computers are going to replace all the jobs. You don't need all these people anymore. You got these computers. What's happened? Today we have more people working and more technology than at any point in the history of the world. And the same thing happened a few millennia ago in Macedonia when they invented the wheel. It initially displaced some jobs, but think how many people's jobs right now depends on the notion that you can move something in a circular motion like that. It always works that way. So it's going to create some training challenges. It's going to create a lot of things, but I think in the long run, it's going to be something like every other invention, robotics, it doesn't matter. You pick whichever one you want to pick, that we're going to end up having more jobs because of it than we did otherwise. And I think that's, you know, I think that, again, that's what always happens. I will say one challenge I see in this is, years ago, presidents are somewhat predictable. No, it doesn't matter what party they're in. And one thing you can count on that always goes together is a recession and a presidential summit to talk about it. Okay, every time there's a recession, we hold a summit to talk about it. And I've been in 6 of them, I think, or something over the years. And years ago, when W was president, we had a downturn, he had a summit. And so he asked me to talk about it in there. And he asked me to define the single best thing the U.S. did to assure its growth over all these decades and the single biggest failure we had, in my opinion. And so I thought about it and did some work and looked at some stuff. And what I determined was the biggest success is we're always able to innovate and create and do the next big thing. No matter what field it is, no matter what it is, we're always the people that create and do the next big thing. And that's been the source of our able to grow and grow and grow despite cost changes, a lot of other things. The worst thing we did is we don't retrain people as much as we need to. As jobs become obsolete, we don't retrain people. We're going to face that same challenge with AI. We're going to need to retrain people to do different jobs than they're doing now, and to do the same job in a different way. We're going to need to do some of that and invest some resources in that. Hopefully we will. But over time, I think that's the single biggest mistake we've made that's held us back, is we haven't always adapted the workforce as rapidly as we could.
Dr. Perriman, back here.
I can't see you. I don't see you, but I can hear you.
I'll stand up. You didn't speak about anything about school choice. I know that's a big topic here locally, and I just thought I want to hear your thoughts on how that might impact the economy.
Did I do something to make you mad?
No?
No, you guys know if you ask me a question, I'm going to answer it. I'm going to tell you what I think. School choice, obviously a very controversial topic, and I'll be happy to talk about it right now. What we are proposing in Texas right now is not a good school choice system. There is such a thing as a good school choice system. Oh, go, okay, you can applaud. Rest of you can boo, whatever, go ahead. Half of you, 1, 2, 3 applaud, 1, 2, 3 boo, you know, whatever. It's fine. but basically how there's nothing new about this. A lot of people don't realize this. In fact, I won a bet with it the other day. In the sort of the book that kind of defined capitalism, the way we think about it years and years ago, was The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, which was written in 1776. He talked about vouchers in there. Okay, this is not a new topic. Okay, he talked about a lot of other stuff too. He went over 200 pages about a pen factory, but he talked about vouchers. Okay, the way it can work is if you have an excellent, well-funded system where everybody can get a great education, and then you layer on top of that a system that says, okay, we'll give each student some money to, like, if you want to specialize in something, and encourage schools to be innovative and specialize in one thing or another and create really great programs on top of an excellent program. Vouchers work very, very well for that, okay? That's not what we have in Texas. We have a school system, we have a challenging demographic in our school system to start with. And I've gone through some of this, I think, in past years, but let me just, I won't go through the whole thing. But at this moment, roughly 54% of the kids enrolled in our schools are Hispanic. That is great, and that is wonderful, because that's the source of all that growth in the workforce I was talking about. But we ran the numbers, and the households those kids come from, those 54% of the kids, have 5% of the household wealth of parents of school kids in Texas. So you got over half the kids and 5% of the money. That means they don't get summer enrichment programs. They don't get tutors. They don't get software or even possibly a computer. They don't get broadband access very easily. It's a challenging group to try to educate. 20% of them come into school with a language barrier. Our black community in Texas is not growing or declining. But the Hispanics growing, that's going to be 65% before you know it. The black population in Texas is very, very steady. It stays about the same all the time, okay? About 12% of our kids are in school are black kids. Those households, 1.6% of the money. You put those together, you got 2/3 of the kids and 8% of the money, okay? Let's talk about the Anglos for a minute. The demographics of Texas is Hispanics are going up, blacks are stable, Asians are going up very rapidly, Asians and others, but from a small base, and Anglos are going down. I mean, that is our demographic in Texas. There's 125,000 fewer Anglo kids in school now than there were 10 years ago, but there's 55,000 more of them that are economically disadvantaged. So what I'm saying is we have a tough population to educate. One out of every 50 kids in our public schools in Texas, that's basically one kid in every 2 classrooms, is homeless. Okay, I mean, we have a tough situation to educate. We are funding public schools. We rank somewhere 40th, depending on which measure you use, somewhere between 38th and 43rd in school funding, depending on which measure you use. So we're not putting in the resources we need to. What the voucher systems we are talking about do is, they'll say, okay, we're going to give parents, and one was 5,000, one was 8,000, pick a number, it doesn't matter. We'll say 5,000, that makes the math a little easier. Let's say a good private school education costs, I don't know, $25,000 a year right now. I don't know what, that's ballpark, I think. People who can afford $25,000 a year get that for each one of their kids. What this system would do is it would make it where people who can afford $20,000 a year can get that for their kids. That would help their kids probably, but it's going to make it even more challenging to have this population that we're relying on to try to educate here is going to become even more challenging at that point. It's not going to help those who are in the most need there. So again, you can design a system if you have the right system to start with. The primary thing we need to do in Texas right now, and I tell people this all the time, if I look at the future of this state, and I get a question sometimes, what keeps me up at night? Economic development is going to depend on workers. We have many, many fewer people in the United States that are young than we had 10 years ago. Over 1 million fewer. young people. We have over 440,000 more young people in Texas. If we educate those kids, there's absolutely nothing that can stop this state from growing like a house of fire. If we don't educate those kids, there's absolutely nothing we can do to make our state grow. In fact, we did a thing and said if we don't improve the school system, things stay just like they are, and we just let demographics kind of take their turn, that literally in 10 years, the average person in Texas, in today's dollar, would be making $6,000 less than they are now. That gives you a state with high needs and low growth. We don't have a great workforce to attract people. We've got all kinds of social issues we have to deal with, and we're not dealing with the ones we have now adequately. So it is literally the single most important thing we'll do is educate these kids. And as they're structured right now, the voucher proposals are not moving us in the right direction to accomplish that. Okay, so that would be my response on that. And again, I accept any applause or any boos you want to give me.
Ray?
Yeah. Somebody,
Ray,
okay, go ahead.
all right. This is your old buddy Dave Jones from Lindale. So glad to have
Hey,
Lindale
David, how
boy
are you?
back. I'm doing well. Good to see
Okay,
you.
would y'all believe he was most handsome and I wasn't? I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, hey, that was a long time ago. Anyway,
Boy, it sure was. Woo. I'm sorry. He's much older than me too. Go ahead, David. I'm sorry.
I realize you're not heavily involved in politics, but what can we expect if we don't do something about the southern border issue with regard to everything you're talking about, with regard to education, our economy, et cetera?
Well, you guys give me all the softballs, aren't you? Mm-hmm. David, by the way, David was one of my high school debate partners years ago, and so we go back a very, very long way. Yeah, the good question about the southern border problem, and we're working with a bunch of stuff on that right now. It is a huge problem. It's a huge problem. As far as the problem that's vexing everyone right now is the folks from Central America, South America, and even some other continents who are coming up through Mexico into the country. That's not a workforce issue. Okay, it's an issue. Those folks are coming here, and David, I think the only way we can solve that problem is we have to help those countries. And I know that's controversial, but I don't see any other way. And let me try to give you a quick analogy about this. Suppose that, and I'm sure many of you fit this category, suppose you're a parent, okay? A lot of parents in this room, I'm sure. You live in a country that's an agricultural country, an agrarian society. You've had an 8-year drought. There is no food. If you stay there, your kids may well starve to death. That's one choice. Your country has been overrun and taken over by gangs. They killed 100 kids yesterday. If you stay there, your kid may get killed by these gangs. So you're saying, if I stay here, my kid may starve. If I stay here, my kid may get killed by a gang. If I take a very difficult several hundred-mile walking journey somewhere with my kid, they might get a better life. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to walk. And if you send them back, whether it's from a wall or a gun or a paperwork, it doesn't matter, any of the stuff we talk about, they're going to wake up the next morning with the same choice. So I really just don't see how we solve the problem with any of the things we're talking about right now. I think we have to, in order to solve that problem, we have to address some of those issues facing those countries, help them deal with those issues so that the people want to stay there. Most people don't want to leave their homeland. Most people don't want to leave their homeland, but they feel like they have no choice. If we could give them an affirmative choice, I think you would see this situation reverse fairly quickly, because it's treacherous to get up here from there. It's not an easy thing to do. And so I think that's the core thing, and I think we're going to have to, as a country, come together with a policy that does something like that. I know the politics are difficult, and I understand that, and it's controversial, but I just don't see any other way that we can solve that problem. And I'm down there a lot in that area. In fact, I was down there last week. It is truly it is a crisis. There's no way around it. It's a very, very serious issue. It needs to be dealt with, and I really don't see any other solution other than that. Oh, okay. Does that mean you like my answer, or does that mean I'm done? Whichever, I guess Jane back up, I guess I'm done. It has been a great pleasure to be here with you. I love the facility. I always love East Texas. I love seeing all my friends. You guys are awesome, and I look forward to seeing you next year. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Perryman. I'm sure that was as entertaining to everyone as it was to me. Very emboldened, in fact, about the ARPA H in Dallas. I'm glad someone over there is getting a win lately. In the meantime, I have a couple of housekeeping issues before we adjourn. I have a couple of announcements. Our next upcoming chamber events will be the Business to Business Expo, which will be Tuesday, January 23rd. Come on out and network. Bring your business cards. It's a great time. And then next after that, we have the Power Networking Breakfast, which will be at the Career and Technology Center on Earl Campbell Parkway, which is on Wednesday, February the 28th. If you would like, there's a limited number of these forecasts at the registration table as you leave. If you would like one and they're out, Henry said leave a business card and he will get a copy to you. Also, a full recording of this presentation will be available on the Tyler Chambers YouTube channel soon. If you'd like to attend the bonus session following our adjournment, please go to the registration table there. I want to also thank, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank, as we were coming in, the sponsors that made this event possible. We appreciate their support. And if you're not a member of the Tyler Chamber, please see Henry, myself, or any of the board members. We'd love to have you join, because without you, we could not do this. So with that, I'm finished. Thank you for your time, and we are adjourned.